from the heart of where innovation, money, and power collide. In Silicon Valley and beyond, this is Bloomberg Technology with Emily Chang.
I'm Emily Chang in San Francisco, and this is Bloomberg Technology. Coming up in the next hour, vacations are back, at least at the happiest place on earth. Disney parks have a blowout quarter, and streaming subscribers beat, with revenue up 70% from a year ago. And a new ad-supported tier is coming to Disney Plus. More on earnings in a moment. Plus, Musk sells more Tesla shares, unloading nearly $32 billion in Tesla stock since November. And he's pointing the finger at Twitter. I'll speak with one of his longtime friends, David Sachs, who has been subpoenaed by Twitter ahead of the trial. And a key metric for Roblox sends shares tumbling. Overall bookings unexpectedly dropping in the second quarter. What does that tell us about the making of the metaverse? Later this hour, Roblox CEO Dave Baszucki joins me one-on-one. All of that in a moment, but first let's get a look at the markets. Tech stocks jumping after data showed inflation decelerated in July. Bloomberg's Ed Ludlow here with the biggest moves. Ed, some good news.
Yeah, some good news. US CPI, 8.5% gain year on year in the month of July. The estimate was 8.7%. Decelerating inflation, cooler than expected inflation, a real outperformance in the technology sector. NASDAQ 100 up 2.9%, outperforming the S&P 500, the broader index. But it's worth noting that the technology and information and communication sectors on the S&P 500 were among the best performing. The stocks up 4%, having dropped by the most since June. Just on Tuesday, a narrative around the changing demand for electronics with chips. And Bitcoin, of course, trading 24/7, but had been up throughout Wednesday's session, around $24,000 per token. As you said, the kind of big company story of the day was Elon Musk selling $6.9 billion of Tesla stock. What he tweeted after we got the regulatory filings Wednesday night was that he wanted to make sure he had the capital in the event that a judge in October, when the deal between Twitter and Musk goes to trial, if the judge were to enforce it, he had the cash on hand, also taking into account whether those equity financing partners he'd lined up stick around that long to help him buy Twitter if he's made to buy it. But you see, that seemed supportive for both stocks, although worth noting we were kind of in a risk-on day where tech was up more broadly. The big breaking news after market in earnings season is Disney. So fascinating because it was kind of a mixed basket of results when it comes to the financials. We're up around 6% in after hours. The main takeaway, the company adding more subscribers for Disney Plus in the quarter than expected and raising prices by 38%. We got 8.5% inflation in the month of July. You got Disney raising prices 38% on Disney Plus. Really interesting and what the market is loving here, but they're liking something. We're up 6% in after hours, Em.
All right, Ed Ludlow, thank you. I want to dig into Disney's results a little bit more now. Bring in Ross Gerber, CEO of Gerber Kawasaki, longtime Disney shareholder, of course. So, as Ed said, Ross, a mixed bag, adding 14.5 million new subscribers to Disney Plus. The bulk of those came from India, others from other countries, and just 100,000 new subscribers from the U.S. and Canada. What's your take?
Well, I don't look at it as mixed bag at all. I look at this as blowout results. I mean, you're looking at Netflix struggling to add subscribers and the tremendous competition in the streaming business, and Disney still growing tremendously, not only Disney Plus, but Hulu as well, and ESPN Plus. So when you look at their streaming business, although it's losing still a lot of money, the future looks very bright for that. And Disney was a great company before streaming. And what's really exciting about the earnings report is the parks are back with over $2 billion of profits and 500 million of it just from consumer products at the park. So, you know, the operating results of this company have improved dramatically.
Right, sort of a broad-based recovery that we're seeing. We've been listening into Bob Chapek, the CEO, on the earnings call. Let's take a quick listen to some of what he's had to say.
And significant subscriber growth at our streaming services, which added 15.5 million subscriptions in the quarter, including 14.4 million Disney Plus subscribers, of which 6 million were core Disney Plus and 8 million were Hotstar. As of the close of Q3, we now have 221 million total subscriptions across our streaming offerings.
Hotstar, by the way, is that service that's offered mostly in India. What do you make of, the addition of this ad-supported tier? It's something that we were expecting. Netflix is doing it as well. Does, Disney potentially have something on Netflix here when it comes to an ad-supported model?
No, I think actually it'll be more beneficial for Netflix, the ad-supported model, because for many reasons. But I think for Disney, because they have, networks and cable channels and stuff. So you're sort of competing against yourself a little bit from the ads, or you're spreading your ads on another property. It's a little bit more complex for them, but it just allows more consumers to watch the content they're making, which is a net positive because they sell through so many other things to the fans, whether it's going to the park or products and such. So for Disney, the most important thing, I don't love Bob Chapek, but he's proving he's a great operator during difficult times. He's not an exciting guy, but he's got the theme park, the profit drivers of the business back. And the losses that they're driving from Disney Plus will ultimately turn to gains over time. So I think they're managing the business pretty well. And there's no recession at Disneyland, I can tell you that.
So what are you looking for in the coming quarter? Obviously, when it comes to streaming, it all comes down to content. Of course, Disney has a huge library, but there's been some concern about how much of the content will continue to appeal to adults, something that Netflix may be doing a little bit better. How do you think about those two players in a rapidly evolving streaming environment?
So I'm still having trouble calling myself an adult, even though I'm 51 and a half today. And as an adult, I watch Disney Plus the minute, Obi-Wan was a great show. I mean, the minute they drop anything Star Wars, I watch it. I what am I supposed to do? So I don't think they have a lot of trouble, and they've got Hulu for really adult content, but they just recently dropped some R-rated movies on Disney Plus, like Deadpool, which are great content. But, it's really a high quality set of assets on Disney Plus, and Hulu is much more like television. So they really are appealing to lots of different demos, and I don't think they lose the older demo at all. And parents like me absolutely trust Disney content with my kids. And, just recently I took YouTube away from them because YouTube Shorts has become the garbage hole of hell. And I don't want my kids watching garbage hole content. And if I put them on Disney Plus, there's nothing they can watch that's bad. So I think parents really trust the brand, and that's starting to really pay off for them.
That's quite a way to describe YouTube Kids. As a mom, can you expand on that?
No, I'm not YouTube Kids, YouTube Shorts.
YouTube Shorts. Can you expand on that?
Yeah. See, what's happened is all the creators on TikTok are now posting on YouTube Shorts, and YouTube Shorts is basically TikTok. And what they're getting now is lower quality content that now switches between so many different topics. Where I monitor my kids' YouTubes because they watch gamers and they'll watch Unspeakable, and that's fine. But then it'll flip them to a video of like a Russian family that exploiting their children, throwing them in the pool or something. I'm like, what are you doing? So with Shorts, I can't monitor it, and in 2 minutes, it's a garbage hole of content. It's just garbage.
Last quick question before you go, because I want to get your thoughts on Tesla. We saw Elon Musk sell $7 billion worth of Tesla shares. He's saying it's to potentially shore up his finances if he has to do this Twitter deal. As this continues to evolve, how are you looking at this as a Tesla investor?
Well, as a Tesla investor, the sooner he can be done with Twitter, the better.
But what if he is forced to buy it? What if he has to buy it?
It's weird to think about forcing somebody to buy a company where everybody at that company hates your guts. So nobody at Twitter wants to work for Elon. Those days are over. This is a disaster. Elon's in a disaster. He sold the stock because he might be liable for $10 billion of damages. And so Twitter, the reason the stock's up, might end up getting a check for billions and billions of dollars so Elon can get out of this. But forcing him to buy the company would even be a worse outcome for everybody involved. And so I don't know if that's the court's intention. It's really to rectify the damage he's caused through this ill-fated merger. So this is a tough time for Elon, and it's really all him. Fortunately, he's the richest man in the world, so he can afford to lose $10 billion. But I think from a Tesla perspective, the sooner this is over, the better.
Ross Gerber, you never disappoint. Provocative as always. Thank you so much, Ross, for sharing your thoughts with us, CEO Gerber Kawasaki. Now, to a Bloomberg scoop, Apple is stepping up its spending on original podcasts. The tech giant signing an agreement with a Pulitzer Prize-winning studio and holding talks with other companies about more deals. According to Bloomberg sources, the deal with Futuro Studios will fund development and production of podcasts, and in exchange, Apple will have the first chance to turn any podcast into a film or television show. All right, coming up, Elon Musk, as we just mentioned, just sold billions in Tesla shares. What does it tell us about his potential Twitter buyout? I'll ask his former colleague and longtime friend, David Sachs, who was just subpoenaed by Twitter ahead of the trial. He's next. This is Bloomberg. Shortly after teasing the possibility of share buybacks, Elon Musk has sold nearly $7 billion in Tesla stock. Tesla and Twitter shareholders appearing to welcome the news. It is Musk's biggest sale ever, and he says it's to avoid a last-minute sell-off if he's forced to go ahead with a deal to buy Twitter. Musk says he'll buy Tesla shares again if the deal doesn't close. Meantime, a number of people in Musk's inner circle have been roped into this legal fight. Among them, Oracle's Larry Ellison, venture capitalist Mark Andreessen, as well as my next guest, longtime tech investor and entrepreneur David Sachs of Kraft Ventures. David, good to have you back with us. So you got subpoenaed. I know you said you were getting a lawyer to try to make this go away. What's the latest on that? Any update?
No update there yet, but I do have this very large, very broad subpoena. It's probably the thickest subpoena I've ever gotten. And I know you're not supposed to talk about these things in these situations, but I have to kind of wonder if that's the point. Is I've been a vocal critic of Twitter's management. Maybe they don't want me talking about these issues. But look, I can just sort of save them a lot of time and hopefully some legal fees. I've never been in possession of non-public information related to their contract dispute with Elon. I've commented based on all the public information that's been out there, and I'm usually when I tweet, I'm usually linking directly to that information that I'm commenting on. So this is sort of a overly broad fishing expedition, and I look forward to hopefully being done with it soon.
So look, we all know you go way back with Elon. You work together at PayPal, and you have expressed support for him, at least in the last several months, when it comes to this Twitter deal. Looking at some of your tweets, the big question is, did you have any non-public information? You talk about bots. You talk about, you suggest that Jack Dorsey masterminded this whole thing. Is this all really just your opinion, or do you know something the public doesn't?
No, I don't. Look, I'm a commentator. I do a pod that's, I've been doing a pod for a couple of years. I've been writing blog posts for years. I've been tweeting for years. I express my opinion on these topics. This is all based on the public information, which again, in the screenshot that you're showing, I'm linking to the public information that I'm reacting to. That was a screenshot from a court filing that Elon's lawyers filed. And those are the facts that I'm citing. So I'm just a public commentator on this issue. Twitter and Elon, they have a fully integrated merger agreement that was negotiated by some of the best lawyers in the world. I don't know what the relevance is of my public commentary on a contract dispute between them. It just doesn't make any sense. But lots of people were kind of roped into this. You saw that Joe Lonsdale tweeted that somehow he was roped into it despite his only connection being a few snarky comments. So I think this is just a very overbroad fishing expedition type subpoena. But when you multiply it by the number of people that they're basically subpoenaing, it kind of amounts to harassment. So I hope that the court will limit this soon.
You mentioned your podcast. You and your All In Pod crew actually interviewed Musk a few months ago, I believe, at your summit. Have you had communications with him over the last several months, private communications? And if so, do any of them pertain to the deal, and could it be at all relevant?
Well, you're referring to an interview we did in public at the All In Summit, and it's on YouTube if you want to go see it. I mean, the news that interview did make some news, but you can just go watch it to see. The question is, do I have relevant information that pertains to this contractual lawsuit. I don't think I do. There's just nothing that I know about this that wasn't already in the public sphere. What I've really offered are opinions, my own opinions, and they're not at anybody's behest or instigation or anything like that.
Now, well,
and
on that note,
I don't know why that I don't know why that would be hard for anyone to understand, because as you all know, Emily, I'm a person who hasn't been shy about expressing his opinions over the years.
Absolutely, and right here on this show. Look, one concern that, Twitter might have is that Elon has been texting all of his friends and asking them to tweet about bots. What's your response to that? Even though these people might not necessarily know or have any expert data or, special information about Twitter's bot issues.
No, I mean, like I said, none of this is at Elon's instigation or behest. It seems to me that Twitter does have a bot issue based on my own usage of the site. I mean, I remember in particular when I was tweeting about, for example, the Ukraine war, all of a sudden, these brand new accounts that had just been created with 0 followers, they were, started in March of this year, they all of a sudden were tweeting things back at me. And it felt like all of a sudden they were trying to drown me out. There's many examples like that. So, the information I'm relying on is what's come out publicly. And what got revealed is that the way that Twitter determines whether it has a bot issue is that they're sampling 100 accounts a day. I mean, in my view, that does not sound sufficient. Now, look, I'm not a statistician. This is just my opinion. I'm sure they'll call all sorts of expert witnesses. But in my view, having operated companies before, if you have a serious issue that could affect your company at an existential level, you do more than just sort of statistically sample 100 accounts a day. That feels like a perfunctory exercise. So that's basically what I tweeted. And, I linked to the public information about this. And that's really all there is to it.
Elon Musk at a Tesla event last week had this to say about Twitter. Take a listen.
I do understand the product quite well, so I think I've got a good sense of where to point the engineering team at Twitter to make it radically better.
So this is as he's still trying to get out of the deal. What do you make of those remarks, David? If he is, say the court forces him to buy Twitter, what do you think he does with it? Does he turn around and resell it? Or does he stick with it and try to, quote unquote, fix it?
Well, I've always hoped that Elon would buy Twitter. I mean, let's be clear. I've supported the deal and the idea of this deal, and I wanted it to go through because I think it would be a societal good if Elon restored Twitter to being a free speech platform. That's been my main interest in this whole thing, is that I'd like to see censorship restrained and free speech restored on a major social network like Twitter. So I've always hoped that this deal would go through. At the same time, I've taken Elon at his word when he tweeted that there's this bot issue, that is a serious issue. And, he has tried to get to the bottom of it. And it seems like Twitter hasn't been fully transparent about that. And so I can understand that issue from his point of view.
I want to get your thoughts on another issue having to do with social media. We've got this hashtag Civil War now trending on social media after the FBI searched Trump's Mar-a-Lago property. As you've talked about many times on this show and in your writing, you are a free speech advocate on social media. But in this particular case, how do you think these platforms, Twitter, Reddit, etc., should handle something like this?
Well, first of all, I would if anyone is calling for violence, I would condemn that. And in fact, you could take down any post that is trying to incite violence or a crime. The content like that is not protected under the First Amendment. So even as a private company—
Do you think the hashtag in itself, like anything with that hashtag, should be taken
down?
No,
well, that's where I was about to go with this, is to say, look, first of all, you can take down, content that would seek to incite violence and be consistent with the First Amendment. However, I don't think that's what this hashtag is necessarily doing. What I see is that people on the right are criticizing this raid on Mar-a-Lago, on President Trump's private home, in which 30 FBI agents who are dressed up as soldiers, wearing body armor and carrying AR-15s, weapons of war, with their fingers just outside the trigger guard. I mean, it looked like a raid of something like, Pablo Escobar's home. They're wondering whether this is the beginning of a civil war, whether a civil war is being declared on them. And I think that's a legitimate question to ask. And you've got to see it in the context of not just this event, but things that have been happening for the last 19 months. I mean, you've had draconian COVID policies that have given unelected bureaucrats dictatorial powers. Even here in California, Gavin Newsom is still ruling under a state of emergency. You've got the Department of Homeland Security, which is a law enforcement agency. They redefined misinformation as terrorism, and then they hired a Democratic Party operative to run a new agency, a sort of Ministry of Truth, devoted to defining what that misinformation would be. And now you've got this raid on President Trump's home, which is utterly unprecedented. And, I don't know what ultimately this was about, but I do think that these agencies deserve the public deserves an explanation from these agencies in terms of what they were after and what they were doing.
All right. Well, once again, you expressing your opinions. I should just underscore. But David, always appreciate hearing your thoughts here on the show, and we'll continue to follow this Twitter story and more. Craft Ventures general partner David Sachs. Appreciate it. Coming up, much more of Bloomberg Technology. Stay with us. This is Bloomberg. Another story we're watching, Samsung just unveiled the latest generation of foldable phones. The new Galaxy Z Fold 4 and Z Flip 4 come with a suite of incremental upgrades, upgraded cameras, a more durable display, a slimmer hinge. Samsung kept prices the same despite surging costs of materials and shipping. Prices are going to go up, though, for Samsung's accessory lineup. And coming up, we are going to dig into the story of a Nebraska teenager, how private Facebook Messenger messages are being used in an abortion case against her and her mother, and what that means for the future of digital privacy post-Roe. Plus, later in the show, my exclusive interview with Roblox CEO David Baszucki on all things earnings, gaming, metaverse, and more. This is Bloomberg. Welcome back to Bloomberg Technology. I'm Emily Chang in San Francisco. I'm going to get back to earnings and shares of Sonos after hours. Ed Ludlow back with us. Ed.
Yeah, not good news. Sonos down almost 20%. That's right, Em, 20% in after hours. They cut their full year sales outlook to 1.73 to 1.76 billion. They previously forecast 1.95 billion to $2 billion, and they're listing every single thing we've already heard in this earnings season in terms of what's going wrong here. A stronger dollar is hurting consumers in all kinds of markets around the world. Inflation is putting off consumer spending, but they're also citing some elements of shifting consumer behaviors. CEO Patrick Spence saying that they're seeing consumers spend less on goods, more on services and travel. They're also hurt by supply chain and a backlog. They basically had missed sales opportunities in the quarter because the supply chain for their hardware has still not fixed itself. So real severe reaction here in after hours, down 20%. I mean, this was a stock that has suffered anyway, down 24% year to date, but there was some hope that, at least on the supply side, Sonos could have improved things. They also recently, for example, launched their own version of Alexa and a voice recognition to compete in that market. But as we know, they're very sensitive to what Amazon's doing as well. But this is not good news for Sonos. Really severe reaction after hours, and one we'll look at on Thursday as well.
All right, Ed, thank you. Meantime, as the pandemic has ebbed, that means less time playing games, and add to that rising prices and also less money being spent on in-game purchases, dressing up avatars and such. That's left some game publishers, console and PC makers struggling to maintain the surge in growth seen during the pandemic. Enter Roblox, which just reported bookings that were disappointing to some, but the company is still growing and expanding into the metaverse. I want to bring in Roblox CEO and co-founder David Baszucki now for more on that. David, great to have you back with us in an exclusive interview. Look, there's no question the macro environment has been tough for a lot of companies, tech companies, and gaming companies in particular. How are you seeing these macroeconomic forces impact Roblox in particular?
Hey, Emily, thank you for having us on the show. And we reach out to everyone who's having a tough time in these economic times. Roblox just had our biggest month in history as far as engagement, as far as users in the US, in Canada, around the world, and in all age demographics. And we're not disappointed at all. We had an amazing July and a wonderful Q2. I think what it highlights is that Roblox is not a game, or maybe even not a game platform. It's a immersive human experience platform where people come together to play, but they come together to learn, they come together to go to concerts. And ultimately, the type of technology we're working on is almost more of a utility that people use in their daily lives.
Your fastest demographic in the US and Canada, at least, is actually 17 to 24 years old, outpacing the younger kids. My son, as I've talked with you about, who's in that younger cohort and loves playing Roblox. What do you think is driving that?
We've always had the vision that Roblox is a civil platform for people of all ages. It brings them together. It allows them to connect authentically, to do things together, whether it's playing, whether it's dissecting a frog in school, whether it's graduating from high school. And I think what we're seeing is, as the players on Roblox get older, they're inviting friends. This growth in 17 through 24 is driven by three things, really. One is amazing content. Almost half of the content on Roblox is now played more by over 13 players than under 13 players. It's driven by the core virality of our platform. It's driven by constant technical innovation, new amazing things around avatars, around immersive layered clothing that allows people to be more closely identified with who they want to be, spatial audio that we rolled out, higher fidelity materials. So it's really a bunch of things driving this growth.
How is engagement and monetization different for a slightly older age cohort?
Yeah, what's interesting is we've been monetizing very well across all ages. One can imagine, as we start looking at older demographics, they do generally tend to spend more money online. And some of the products we are working on right now and that we've hinted on, including a visionary ad server product that's immersive and native and actually feels fun rather than getting in the way of our players. Those types of things typically tend to monetize better with older players. So there's really a huge future for our platform, not just around the world, but as we get more and more older players on the platform.
Now, you keyed in on the disappointment among some analysts and investors earlier, and you have always talked about a grand vision, these 7 big inventions that are going to take years and years potentially to play out. How do you convince investors who might have a shorter term time horizon to stick around?
Yeah, what's really interesting, think of the engagement. July, the biggest month we've ever had, 4.7 billion hours of engagement on our platform, 58.5 million daily active users. Our 13 and up cohort is growing at over 36% year on year. And traditionally, as we grow engagement, we grow monetization. There's enormous space in countries like India and Japan in the cohort for older players for us to continue growing along to our vision, really, of connecting 1 billion people with optimism and civility.
You've expressed frustration at times about being measured against these analysts' estimates. And I'm curious, given that you've waited so long, I mean, Roblox was founded in the early 2000s. You waited a long time to become a public company. Do you have any regrets about going public, or has going public benefited Roblox?
Yeah, well, to be clear, I don't think I've ever expressed any frustration at any analyst. I think they're all trying to do our job. We do keep optimistically talking about the size of the potential market here. We keep talking about the amazing people we're bringing on board. I just want to highlight our business model is robust enough that we're continuing to hire amazing people through the midst of what is for many people a difficult time. And we have absolutely no regrets about going public. We run our business exactly the same now as we used to before we were public.
Given the macro environment, how are you thinking about spending? I spoke to Apple CEO Tim Cook. He used the word deliberate. They're being very deliberate about spending, deliberate about hiring. We're seeing layoffs and cutbacks at other companies. Are you stepping on the gas or pulling on the brakes?
We are being consistent. We're hiring at the same rate in the second half of the year as we were in the first half. We've always been very deliberate about our spending because everything we spend is money that does not go back to our developer community. We have amazing people who innovate at a very rapid pace. We have a very efficient infrastructure. We have a very wonderful trust and safety team. But as much as possible, we're trying to be efficient so our developers can take a bigger piece of that pie and keep making amazing creations.
You're planning to roll out an immersive advertising system later this year. Can you give us any more color on that?
Yeah, this has been a vision for a long time. The notion that when we're together in a 3D experience, we start to see some of the interesting things like billboards or a pop-up store in the town square that we're actually quite optimistic based on the brands we work with that these will not feel like something that gets in your way, but they will feel like something that's additive to the Roblox experience. And the brands that we work closely with tend to be fun, interesting brands like Gucci Town, which just released, I think in March and had over 30 million visits, or Tommy Play from Tommy Hilfiger, Wimbledon, Wimble World, Spotify Island. These are brands that we think actually enhance the experience and will integrate in with this immersive advertising system.
Now, I'm curious how you're thinking about M&A. We're seeing some gaming and ad tech companies joining forces at the moment. Are you thinking about M&A, and if so, in what areas?
Yeah, I think we've acquired 6 or 7 or 8 companies in the last 2 years. There's a common thread of the companies we've been acquiring, which is absolutely amazing people who are very creative and innovative, and people that are working exactly on some of the technologies we're working on with our Roblox platform. So we have this wonderful business model where we bring these people and these teams together, but it's 100% focused on improving our single platform rather than maybe buying a second studio or pivoting in some direction. We're 100% focused on the quality of the Roblox platform.
Meantime, there are still a lot of skeptics out there who don't understand the metaverse, who don't believe it's going to be a thing. When it comes to the metaverse and these immersive experiences that you're talking about, what's the next development on the near-term horizon that's going to help us all better understand this and potentially even experience it?
Yeah, I think the more people see, just like print or video, people using immersive 3D as a utility technology. I'll give an example of one thing we're doing with First Robotics, which is First Robotics is a wonderful educational platform. It requires everyone to have a robot building kit in the real world, and there are many people in the real world who don't have access to this. So our partnership with them is simulating that exact same thing, competitive robot building, seeing what you can build, see how it works, 100% on Roblox and simulation. This is, really a utility use of a platform that I think as people see this, they just start to say, yeah, we see the wide range of uses from music, entertainment, play, learning, and ultimately working, that I think everyone will understand this is just a continuation of communication technology.
All right. Roblox CEO and co-founder David Baszucki. David, great to have you back with us. Thanks for taking time out of a busy earnings week. Appreciate it. Okay, coming up, crypto rallies on the new CPI report, but is it to last? And who are the leaders of the rally? We'll have more on that next. This is Bloomberg. Time now for our crypto report, and cryptocurrency surged after a softer than expected inflation number, with the CPI increasing 8.5% in July from a year earlier, cooling from that 9.1% back in June, which was the largest in 4 decades. Bloomberg's Katie Greifeld here for more. Katie, any crypto winners in this rally?
Basically, the whole space was winning today. If you look across your crypto screen on the terminal, it all comes back to Bitcoin, of course, the largest cryptocurrency out there, having a fantastic day, up over 3% on Wednesday. Of course, that ties back to the reaction we saw in the stock market. You had the NASDAQ 100 up 2.9%. You can almost bet that Bitcoin's going to be up as well, just given that very tight correlation. And that all ties back to sort of wagers that the Fed is going to have to be less aggressive than maybe feared. And you saw that reflected in the bond market as well. But Bitcoin, your big winner. You also had Ethereum rallying very strongly, up almost 9%. Again, on Wednesday alone, as you can see in that chart, it has had quite the run over the past month and a half or so. But there is some fundamentals news there, of course, as we await the merge.
All this coming up, as you say, ahead of the merge. You know, how are investors bracing for this? And is it really going to happen?
It's a great question, a little bit impossible to answer. So it's known as the merge. It's a software update, basically. We've been waiting for it for a while. Theoretically, it's going to happen in the back half of this year. But what's important tonight, actually, you're going to see the so-called girly test. It's a German word. It's scheduled to take place. It's basically a test merge with a test network. And you have analysts saying this is the final dress rehearsal before we get to the actual merge. So that's what you're seeing reflected in the price. Just basically optimism that this test will go well and maybe we'll get the actual merge to follow soon.
All right, Katie Greifeld, thank you for that update. We'll be right back with more after this quick break. This is Bloomberg. I want to talk about Facebook now and how the app was used recently in an abortion case. A woman charged with 2 felonies related to an illegal abortion after authorities discovered information about the pregnancy through private messages on Facebook Messenger. This according to court documents. Jessica Burgess had helped her 17-year-old daughter obtain abortion pills when she was more than 20 weeks pregnant, making a termination of the pregnancy illegal in the state. Her daughter also facing related charges. I want to bring in Bloomberg's Sarah Fryer now for more on this. So set the stage a little bit here. What happened?
Well, what happened in the case, or what happened in
how did they obtain
debate?
these messages?
Well,
right.
so this is not the perfect case to look at when we're talking about whether tech companies will give over data to authorities in the post-Roe world. That has been a big concern. But this case, actually, the warrant for this information went out to Facebook before the Roe case, before Roe was overturned. And initially, it didn't even ask for anything related to abortion. It asked for these messages related to the improper treatment of skeletal remains. So that was really what was at stake here. So Facebook cooperated with that. And then through that search, they found these messages about the abortion pill and then added those charges. So Facebook came out with a statement saying, listen, we didn't know this was about abortion. That statement seemed to imply that, they would have been hands off if it was. I'm not sure that's the case.
So let's take a look at this statement. This is from Meta. The warrants concern charges related to a criminal investigation, and court documents indicate that police at the time were investigating the case of a stillborn baby who was burned and buried, not a decision to have an abortion. Both of these warrants were originally accompanied by non-disclosure orders, which prevented us from sharing any information about them. The orders have now been lifted. So as you say, this statement begs the question, if they believe this did have to do with an abortion, that Facebook would have done something differently. Would they have?
Well, that's where I think they need to bring out some clarification, because that is what, if you read between the lines of the statement, that's what it's implying. But I don't think that that's what's going to happen. I mean, tech companies do tend to comply with the law in states where it is the law. Otherwise, they can't operate there. Their business comes under risk. And so I think we're going to see many, many cases where it's not even clear in the warrant that they're searching for abortion-related data. And it's going to be up to companies like Facebook, and Facebook has come out and said this in the past. It's going to be up to them to make sure that those requests are not overly broad, that they have some sort of legal parameters that they're following, that it's not just a wild goose chase through Facebook messages to try to find something to convict somebody, and then that they let users know when their data has been requested. And so that's been the line from the company. They're not coming out and saying either way whether they would cooperate with authorities on abortion cases, but my guess is a lot of the companies will end up having to do that.
So this brings back the case of the San Bernardino shooter back in December 2015. Apple refused to turn over this shooter's iPhone. This is somebody
Refused
who
to unlock
killed
it, correct.
12 people. How do you compare this to that standoff?
Well, I think we haven't seen a lot of tech companies standing up to law enforcement in the time since. They've just put those parameters around it. Like we don't want our users to, we don't want to just have a backdoor to all of the messages that they ever send. And the tech companies have worked on things, Apple included, on encryption, on making sure that there's a private way for people to send messages. So I think while this gets cleared up, the best advice for anyone using any tech product is to use an encrypted messaging service. If you're going to, whether it's Signal or WhatsApp or
right, is WhatsApp better? That's a Facebook property.
It's better than Messenger for the most part, but Messenger does now have an option to send encrypted messages. And the point from the companies then would be like, we can't give this message to law enforcement because it doesn't exist on our servers.
All right, so a couple of things. This happened with Facebook before Roe was overturned. And a number of big tech companies, of course, have a lot of information about us. So
think about your search history, think
is,
about your Gmail, think about everything.
What do these companies do if law enforcement comes at them and asks for emails, texts,
the companies
messages,
have been
search history, buying history?
The companies have been mum on it because there hasn't been a perfect case to rally around. And I think what's happening with this case is people are looking at it and saying like, ooh, abortion messages from Facebook, like Facebook's, giving it up to law enforcement, endangering a woman who needs an abortion. But then when you look at the details, it gets murkier because it's after 20 weeks in the state where it's illegal there. There was burial of the body. I don't know if I want to go into the details are a little too dark to even go into on air. But I think that the case is not the one that privacy advocates probably want to rally around. It's not. It is just an indicator of how murky each one of these things is going to be. There's never going to be a perfect, clean-cut decision where you can say, like, this is not an area where we're going to cooperate, or we are definitely going to cooperate in every case.
What's your sense of whether this Nebraska case could create a precedent for what happens in these cases when these requests are made by law enforcement?
Well, the problem is every state is changing their laws in this moment, right? In the past few weeks, we've seen abortion get limited, restricted, criminalized. People who help out with abortions in some states, whether even it's just having knowledge that they exist, it can lead people to legal liability. So I think that it's opening up liability for users of these platforms beyond even just patients who might get abortions. So I do think that this is a very big area that we need to continue to look at, because if companies continue to just blanketly comply with law enforcement wherever it goes, users of these platforms are going to get increasingly concerned about their privacy and their ability to conduct normal everyday business.
All right, very complicated, nuanced issue. Sarah Fryer, thank you for helping us wade through all of that. Appreciate it. And that does it for this edition of Bloomberg Technology. Coming up Thursday, I'll be sitting down with the new CEO of Pinterest. Bill Reddy is joining us for an exclusive conversation about his first month on the job. This is Bloomberg.